Welcome, Kate.
Thanks so much, Kira. Let me get my screen shared. All right. There we go. Can everybody see my slide?
Yes.
All right. Great. Thank you all for joining. I'm very excited to tell you all about an initiative that I co-led uh, over a number of years at my previous work at University of Michigan that I have titled the Wiki-vengers Initiative. So First, I'll give a little about me. As Kira just mentioned, I'm now a digital scholarship specialist at University of Michigan Libraries. Previously, I worked as a digital humanities archivist at Michigan State University, and there I was located outside of the library. I was in a college, but I did a lot of work on an initiative called the Graphic Possibilities Research Workshop with my colleague Julian Chambliss. Um, we did the research workshop involves research and teaching in comics generally, and I was involved on an initiative called Comics as Data. Um, but here's all my contact information if you'd like to reach out to me and talk about Wikidata things in any way. Um, and I also have the link to the slides there, which I can put into put into the chat for our folks on Zoom today. There's plenty of links in here, so hopefully you all can get access to them. All right, so let's start with the collection. This whole project started even before I was at Michigan State University, wanting to do some kind of collections as data project with the Michigan State University comic art collection. This is the largest publicly accessible collection of comics in the world, probably the universe. It's contractually obligated to say. There's over 300,000 print comic books and artifacts. They have tons and tons of stuff dating all the way back to the 1880s, all the way up through the 2020s, and it was mainly indexed lovingly by Randy Scott, the now retired comics librarian at Michigan State University. So, because of this opportunity that the collection presented, um, we wanted to create a data set using all of this bibliographic metadata that we had about the comics and all these artifacts. A team formed, including myself, Julian Chambliss, Scout Calvert, Devin Higgins, Ronti Junis, and Kristen Mapes at MSU. Um, to create a data set called Comics as Data North America. We occasionally call it CADNA, uh, but it's available on GitHub, I believe is where that's linked. But we scoped it just to comics published in the United States, Canada, and Mexico from 1880 to 2018. It's around 50,000 MARC records that we transformed into tabular data and then cleaned and cleaned and cleaned to try and make some kind of knowledge uh, out of this data. So the guiding question after we did all this cleaning work was, okay, what does it mean to engage with comics as data? What do we want to do with this project? And we came up with some goals, having thought about what is this whole comics as data thing anyway. I have a meme on this slide from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where one character is asking, you have to start asking yourself the big questions. What is this whole comics as data thing anyway? Uh, but we wanted to create new knowledge from this collection and analyze comic making communities. and make unknown creators and publishers more visible. The collection has a lot of underground comics makers, a lot of smaller publishers, indie comics, tons and tons of stuff that is not um, more readily available or occurs to people as easily. So we initially focused on um, dates and locations, and we were able to create this visualization through Flourish, which is linked at the bottom of my slide. Hopefully you can all see this video, but this is it's a map showing showing North America, and there are little dots popping up as the visualization plays forward. So they are sized by I wish this would loop. They are sized by every like pulse is sized by the number of comics published in that place in that year. Um, and they're located where they are located. So you can see we've got a huge dot here right over New York. We have a lot of big dots in California. Unsurprisingly, as we know, like New York is where a lot of DC and Marvel comics are published. But here, I'll pause it right there. But we have all these other littler dots around uh, around the US, especially. So this kind of prompted us to think, okay, what about the local communities? Everybody talks about the bigger publishers. What about the local communities? And around this time, the pandemic hit, and I honestly needed something to work on. And because I love data cleaning, I turned to OpenRefine, and I started to look at the publishers to kind of figure out, okay, so we know we've got a lot of we've got a lot of DC, we've got a lot of the kind of big name comics. What can we do with the information about publishers and authors in this data set? So I started doing what's called reconciliation in OpenRefine. So it goes, I had OpenRefine go through our author columns in our spreadsheet and try to match it to people on Wikidata. Um, and especially for publishers, this is really helpful because publishers kind of change their names over time. Sometimes they're listed differently. And this allows us to match all of those names into one. Um, And I have to have a little slide about Wikidata, just in case you don't know. But the reconciliation to Wikidata is really helpful because it's a huge repository. It has a lot of data that's publicly accessible. You don't need an API to access it through OpenRefine. You can just you can reach it there. It's also community driven, so it combines a lot of different knowledge bases into one open access area. It's multilingual, um, which is super helpful. We have a lot of comics in the data set that are in Spanish, so that makes it a lot easier to normalize. Um, so after a lot of work in OpenRefine, um, I found that I was able to match about 70% of our publishers, but 29% could not find them on Wikidata. Um, for authors, I was able to match 63% of them. However, there were over 5,000 names unreconciled that I wasn't able to find matched to Wikidata. Also, I encountered another issue that I have dubbed the Marmaduke problem based on this specific instance involving the name Brad Anderson. There are two people named Brad Anderson who are or have been active in the comic space. One of them is the creator of Marmaduke, as you can see, the mischievous Great Dane comic on my left side, and the other is a colorist for DC Black Label, so Batman, Three Jokers, that cover on the right. Very different kinds of material here. Not the same person. There's even a note in their Library of Congress authority records not to confuse them. However, in our data set, we had 24 records of the word of like titles with the word Marmaduke in them, and all but two of them were attributed to the DC colorist. And that's in our data, our library data, which is a major issue. And I encounter this is a rare example where the lesser known person gets attributed to the work. But there were most of the examples that I found were a lesser known person was being erased for a more well-known person. And oftentimes Wikidata would like since there are people who have the same names, Wikidata would say like, is this the comics artist? And I had to be like, no, that's a football player. It's not the same person. I found one. There was a comics artist in Hamtramck, Michigan, where I'm located. Well, I'm not located in Hamtramck, but I'm located in Michigan. And a lot of her work was attributed to a Swiss textile artist in our data. So this was a major issue that we could not solve on our own as a team. So we needed some help. uh, we decided to create the Wiki-vengers Initiative to bring together a group of remarkable people to see if they could make this data into something more, and if we could work together when we needed them to create the information we never could. We started with Wikidata edit-a-thons. We held them virtually due to the pandemic, which actually helped us bring in a diverse group of people. But we started having Wikidata edit-a-thons to start bringing in like, okay, let's address this gap of like all the publishers and authors that are missing, as well as all of the mistakes that are in our data. So our goals we set really low. We wanted to just create authors and publishers, make sure people can learn these basic Wikidata concepts. So the fall, we would start with adding things to the data, to Wikidata, and then in the spring, we would have a visualization workshop where we would let people make use of the data that we had created in the fall. So in 2020 to 2021, we looked at the like golden age of comics, and then the next year we did Silver Age, and then in 2022 to 2023 we did Bronze Age. That one we shifted gears a little bit in the middle, which is why we just did the fall, so we could switch gears. These events brought together a like variety of people. Um, we had a lot of people who were librarians and Wikidata enthusiasts, people who were interested in just doing digital humanities work. We brought in a lot of folks who were interested in comics, and a lot of people were in multiples of these groups. And we also reached out to institutions that had strong comics collections or had like uh, faculty who research comics on their own time. So we brought together a lot of different people, which meant that we had to kind of cater to a lot of different experience levels. I should say up front, I am not somebody who knows a lot about comics. So I kind of brought in the like Wikidata expertise and the data side of this project and relied on others to bring in more of that like domain knowledge. But because we were working with a lot of beginners, we used a lot of open source tools, which I have linked here that I find really useful to get people to onboarded onto Wikidata. Um, we used mix and match a lot during this beginning phase. I'm going to show you what mix and match looks like, but essentially, it's an open source tool created by Magnus Manske. I hope I said his name right. Where you can upload a catalog of data and then very similar to what I did in the initial years, but check each entry in a data set against Wikidata and it allows you to either match it and move on, or you can create a new item very easily. So the most recent catalog added is the IMCDB, the Internet Movie Cars Database, which is apparently a data set of cars that are in movies, which I found very charming. But it's a very simple idea and a very easy, barrier of entry way to get into uh, Wikidata. So here I'm going into match mode. I'm not currently logged into Wikidata, so I don't have the options, but it allows you to go entry by entry to find. So this one is Gigabyte, and you can look into it will search Wikidata to see if it already exists. And you can also it will look through Wikipedia so you can start seeing like, okay, does this exist on either of these wiki sources? And if it exists on Wikipedia, that makes it easier to make a Wikidata item, vice versa. But this does not seem to show up. So then you can actually go to the catalog and get information there. So in the early days, we used a lot of mix and match so that we could, excuse me, so that we could very easily and quickly search through Wikidata to find to look for our publishers and our authors. Cradle, we used a little bit later, is another tool that uses, it basically creates you can create a form for a certain kind of entity. And we created one for comic edition. You find it down here. And here it is. So this is the comic edition Cradle. And you can just fill out all the labels, all of these properties that that you need for the Wikidata item. And then once you've filled out as many fields as you can add, it will you'll be able to create an item out of it. So it makes it a little bit more user friendly if you're doing a Wikidata edit-a-thon where you're creating a lot of new items. We also created some sample queries. The one linked here is for a network visualization. So then you can add all the QIDs in here and see how different entities are collected. And you'll see an example later. But because Wikidata is open source, it's free, there's a lot of tools that people have created to make use of and create Wikidata. We made use of dashboards for these edit-a-thons, so we could track all of our stats. These are the results for our 2020 edit-a-thon, which was heavily focused on mix and match. So that's why there's fewer items created, but we did make a good amount of edits throughout. Then in the spring, we had our first visualization workshop. We divided folks up into groups to kind of like say, okay, work with this Golden Age publisher and see what you can make. So this is the visualization from the Fawcett Publications group, where you can see connections between like the creator of Captain Marvel and all of that and how that evolved over uh, the course of many years. We also had one group create a comics publisher's timeline before 1956. So you can see like all of the early comics publishers. Obviously, the industry changed a lot after 1956, but this shows kind of a larger group. So we did this for 3 years on this kind of rhythm. And once we did our Bronze Age event, we said, okay, well, what's next? And thought back to our goals. And we really wanted to, we realized we wanted to, like, if we wanted to analyze comic making communities, we needed to start making connections between these authors and publishers. We did have to, we wanted to reflect on kind of the challenges on of doing Wikidata events, and especially on doing them with about specifically comics, the item, rather than people or publishers. Comics provide like a large challenge in data modeling because you have, as you see in the Spider-Man meme, you have a lot of different instances of Spider-Man. You have different universes. You have crossover issues. You have series that so one series and another will have a crossover issue. So you'll get Deadpool and Wolverine in the same one, and then it'll continue. Each will continue past that. So trying to figure out how to model those series is a major challenge, and how to model characters who have many different versions because of the multiverse and different authors. And sometimes things get renumbered. There's also, because of these challenges, there's not a lot of best practices out there. So during these events, we were often kind of creating best practices together in the room, which is fun, but kind of like a little scary sometimes. And we also still have those like high barrier of entry issues. And there's also just so much data. We have 50,000 comments that we're working with. It's a lot. It's a lot to dig through. We also wanted to find ways of generating more engagement and targeting them. Uh, so we came up with our next phase, which we called 50 States of Comics. So in these events, we partnered with a specific, usually university, to work on adding comics from that state. So we could like work with those communities and bring in, have a little bit more targeted audience. Um, so we could, showcase local comics like this one. So this is Captain Cornelius. This was published out of Illinois by like the Corn Lobby, essentially. One of our wonderful finds during our Illinois event. So in 2023, we focused on Michigan comics. And then in 2024, we had an event with Illinois. And then in 2025, we worked with Ohio. So to bring in, people, work with people at those universities to like, okay, you want to put on a Wikidata event, we'll provide the data, we will provide some of the know-how, you bring in your community, get people to come, and we'll help with all the technical things. One of the things that we brought into like to lower that barrier of entry even more, since we weren't using mix and match for this particular, we decided not to use mix and match for this phase because the data sets were too big, and we tried to upload them to mix and match and it would fail. So we had to find alternate ways. Um, so we started training people a little bit more on like editing Wikidata slightly more directly. We came up with this workflow. So we told people we created a data sheet in Google Sheets, and I'll show. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong link. Um, I'll find that in a minute, and I'll just keep talking. But we'd have them create a data sheet that people could use that's a little bit more accessible than the original sheet, um, original data set, and it just had what we needed. And then, so have that open and have Wikidata open. And we created a simple workflow to get people working in Wikidata. So choose one line in the data set, figure out what it is, figure out if it's on Wikidata, and then make whatever data it is in Wikidata. So if it's not on Wikidata, make a new item. If it is, add more info. Then add your references, and then put the QID into the spreadsheet so we know that it's done. If you look me up on YouTube, I have a whole tutorial for how we did this, but this is the kind of simplified workflow that we created. So I'm going to show a little bit more about like how we trained people to make comics Wikidata and hope in the hopes that that's kind of useful to you all as you're training people. So you just need a Wikimedia account, an internet connection. Here we go. This is the data set that I wanted to show. Um, so I'll show you the spreadsheet just because it's helpful. So in the column A, this is where people signed up to make a comic. Then we had like each of these columns mapped directly to a Wikidata property. So it was a lot of like copying and pasting. So this is the label and also the title. We have description and then a link to the MSU catalog record because that's really helpful in determining what something is. And then we have for more of the properties, we have columns that have their property number and what the property is. So some of these are just like text. This is the catalog number that we have a property for in Wikidata. But then these are the language is linked to the actual item for language. Not all of them have these links. So we have some of our authors do exist on Wikidata. This data comes from my initial reconciliation. So some people have been added since then. But we have even if they're not, so if they're not on Wikidata, like Jimmy's Winterton, you can either just add their name under author name string, or if you want brownie points, you can add an item for Jimmy Swinnerton. Uh, so that's our spreadsheet. Uh, then you'll need to follow our workflow. And as always, this is an important way to think about Wikidata is having a little grit and a willingness to ask questions. So a lot of Wikidata work can be a little bit drudgerous. It can be challenging and it can feel like, oh, I don't know, I'm just not going to do anything. But if you take a mindset of being curious and asking questions, it becomes a lot more interesting and a lot more fun, especially in a community setting. We had so many instances of like, okay, so I think this is this. How do I put that into Wikidata? And we would kind of work it out together in the Zoom room. I always like to go over the notability requirements just so that people know. Um, Generally, in events like this, we're living in the second requirement. So it deserves to be in Wikidata if it refers to a clearly identifiable conceptual or material entity that can be described using serious and publicly available references. So that's where the MSU catalog comes in as our publicly available reference. And each instance here is a clearly identifiable conceptual or material entity. Here's our workflow again with the actual correct link. We also made available a slightly more detailed workflow in case the other one didn't quite work, but this showing kind of the decision tree of is it on Wikidata? If it's not, create the new item and then add your statements from the spreadsheet. Okay. The biggest thing that we focused on in training people was talking about data modeling, which we didn't always call it data modeling, but essentially to train people on making Wikidata, the first thing we wanted to do is say, okay, like what is the thing that you are making? What kind of thing is this? And what relationship does it have to other items? That's the most important things about any Wikidata item that you are making. You have to know what it is before you can create an item for it, and you need to know what sort of relationship it has to other items. Since as a linked open data set, that's the important thing. That's the unique thing about Wikidata is that it's a relational data set. Um, so this is a an instance of a comic in the MSU catalog, Helena Catfight. And we gave a tutorial for basically how to read a catalog record since that was important. And we instructed people to look at, okay, how is it published? If you can find a number, if it has a number, that means it's a comic book. It's within a series. So then you can identify it as an instance of comic book. This was really important because in our data set, we have a lot of like sets of comic strips that were literally cut out of a newspaper. And so knowing that specific instance is not like one comic strip, it's collective, was really, really important. Now I'll show a little bit of our results from doing this kind of Wikidata event. So this Wikidata query. You don't have to know Sparkle. I'll just tell you this query is looking for comics and comic strips and comic books that were published in Ohio. Um, and we got one result in Wikidata. This was right before our event in Ohio. There was only one. And after the event, there were so much more. So this is a query that you can actually run if you want to use my slides and go into that link. You can see there's a lot of, this is mapping the entire US, all of the comics that are that were published in those places. I will say these dots are sized equally, so several of these dots actually look like one dot, but they represent a whole. So you can see our Ohio event was really successful. That's a lot more than one dot. I can show you very quickly. This is that same visualization through the query service. And we can click. We got several. There we go. So when you click on a visualization in the query service, and it'll pop open many of them. So we have Supreme, The Return, Hellraiser, all published in this spot. I'm going to highlight Chicago just because there's a bunch here. This is where all of our Foxy Grandpa comics are. Foxy Grandpa it was a very popular character in some early comics. And I think the first line of our data set, the full data set is a Foxy Grandpa comic. So it makes me happy to see Foxy Grandpa in the wild. So while this visualization it's not perfect, it's not the most exciting, maybe, you can see we made a really strong impact in increasing in Wikidata the comics published in Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. Now I want to talk about lessons learned. A lot of Wikidata work involves communication across boundaries, whether that's like language boundaries, field boundaries, experience boundaries. Wikidata work, sorry. Wikidata work is always already interdisciplinary. We all need all different kinds of brains to try and make all of this work. And the goal is always reaching collective understanding, if not consensus. Um, I also found, as I kind of mentioned already, these like welcoming environments make for better data work. So that like safe, brave space that art and feminism always has as like part of their ethos is so helpful for Wikidata because we're all coming together to try and make this work. And it doesn't matter like how much work you've done. Everybody can contribute to Wikidata, and your experience is valid. Um, I also have this like little soapbox that I always do that like we can't innovate if we don't experiment. And Wikidata is a good place to experiment with things to see how they work. And yes, sometimes the things you do will upset other people or like sometimes things get corrected, but that's because we're doing something really hard when we're trying to make Wikidata. We're trying to like turn the whole world into a structured data set. And that's really hard. And so things are not always going to work out. And but if you hold on to that kind of like that progress that you're making as a collective, it can feel a lot better. I also want to talk about in terms of like why Wikidata matters, as opposed to, all the other data sets in the world. Why is Wikidata important? Um, And I think about D'Ignazio and Klein's data feminism. One of their principles is called pluralism. So embracing pluralism in the whole process of working with data, allowing time and space for a range of participants to contribute their knowledge to a data project and do so at all stages of that project. So Wikidata is the easiest way to enact data pluralism. For better for worse, we're all putting work into this giant collective effort, and everyone's individual experience helps shape Wikidata. And I think that's the most exciting thing about Wikidata is that we can everybody's perspective matters, but is also so critical into making Wikidata what it is. And finally, what's at stake just beyond, data pluralism is good. Uh, Wikidata allows us to enrich and extend and correct library data or any other kinds of data sets. So, like the Marmaduke problem, we can accurately represent who is in our data set, who is doing the things. We can diversify the historical narrative, so we can bring together a lot of different sources. I found a number of sources describing comics creators from their obituaries that were written by like dear friends in the community. And that's not, an academic article about them, but it's still a reliable source to find those things. We can add them to Wikidata. Um, and that allows us to enact data pluralism across the information ecosystem. So that's my little soapbox. That Wikidata and Wikipedia are some of the uh, are the main ways that we can shape all of these open AI systems, all these like generative AI models that are gobbling up everything free on the internet. The more that we diversify the narratives available there, uh, the better those models will be. We can't completely fix it, but we can try, and that's what's important. So I will leave you with my other maxims for working in Wikidata. Ask questions, take breaks, and do your best. And I welcome any questions. Thanks so much for having me.
This is Kira speaking. Thanks so much, Kate. And I think thank you so much for this whole presentation and for sharing about the work that you have been doing. I so many I like we were saying even before the call started, like so many cool tools that you use and I feel like learning about all the time. And I think like the note in which you ended on like why this work is important is exactly what we're talking about at Art and Feminism. Like it's so important for us to be not essentially perpetuating these gaps that we already are well documented on Wikipedia, making sure that they're not perpetuated in Wikidata. But
Hmm.
yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you so much. Are there, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.